fact, I'm going to be a citizen early in 2017.
Yay! We're so happy to have you.
It took me 15 years of being here to decide finally to do it.
What was it that put you over the edge? The coffee bean? Or,
I think it was the coffee bean, to be honest. Not the tea leaf, just the coffee bean.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, I love how you know, when you look at, first of all, like your on-camera work, you can be so many different ethnicities. Forget even the accents and the dialects that you do. But you are... I mean, we've seen you be a Mexican doctor. We've seen you be Middle Eastern. I mean, it's just like incredible.
Yes, I call it my stop me in the airport looks.
Stop me in the airport
Stop
looks.
me in the airport looks. Yeah, I get flagged a lot because
Do
I
you
look like
study
every
them?
dodgy.
I know, right? It's like,
Well,
wait a
I'm
minute.
half.
Could he be?
I'm half Middle Eastern. I'm half
you?
Lebanese, and so my passport picture looks like I have done something
Right, but
wrong.
Lebanese don't really count. They're the party. They're the partiers of the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the fun Arab guys. Arabs and Christians.
We have great food too.
Great food.
Yeah, but I might see you on the side. 'cause
Yeah,
I
yeah, we'll get
I
patted
the
down
pat
together sometime.
I get,
Absolutely.
I get
well, let's
patted
get down
down
to
quite
it.
a
I got
bit.
some questions.
Okay.
So you were born in France.
I was.
Don't interrupt me. You were born,
couldn't either confirm nor
born in
deny.
France,
Yeah.
raised in the UK.
Yeah.
So take us back a little bit and give us a little bit of, how you grew up and, how things developed and what led you to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Can you do that?
It's a long story. I can.
You're gonna let him talk. Now you can talk.
You got 2 minutes. Go.
Okay. So yeah, I was born in Paris. My mother met a Frenchman while she was working for BP in Paris, and he swept her off her feet. And then she realised that he was very French, and so they divorced when I was very young, and we moved to England and stayed with my aunt in North Yorkshire, which is about halfway between London and Scotland. A little more towards Scotland.
Right.
And I ended up growing up in a my mother remarried, and I grew up in a tiny little village in Yorkshire of about 400 people.
Wow, that's tiny.
But it did have 2 pubs, so that was all right.
That's big
Just
for
in the
tiny.
village. Yeah. Well, they take the drinking very seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't drink breast milk. It's beer that comes out of the mother's boob when you're young. We didn't have money, but my mum inherited some money and put me in a posh private boarding school for boys only, which was a very, very old place, founded in 1555, somewhere up near the Scottish border in Cumbria, which is an extraordinary place to be.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you just get me out of here. Please get me out. In the village
How old
I
were
grew
you
up.
when this happened?
Well, I was at boarding school from the age of 7 to the age of 18.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I looked at my 7-year-old kid, I can't imagine sending her away. But that was a different time, and
Totally.
particularly in England, they thought that was very good for your development. And, and so it was this kind of archly conservative environment. But within this archly conservative environment, you get these little lefty English teachers who are very kind of revolutionary and slightly commie and slightly want to, and we started doing plays, and I did some sort of like Gilbert and Sullivan musicals and stuff like that, stuff that you kind of do. And I just felt at home there. I wasn't really, growing up in the 70s and being a French kid wasn't pleasant in England. I was, anything, what it's like when you're a kid, you just don't want to be singled out for anything.
Right.
And it was tough. I got called the N-word at school. I mean, just because I was slightly darker than the average kid. Yeah, this is the 70s in England. Yeah, we're talking like, it's 1974, 75.
Like neighbor? They call
And
you
did you
neighbor?
speak with a French
They called me
accent?
neighbor.
They call you neighbor. I can't believe they would call
Get
you
out of here,
neighbor.
neighbor. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, they called him Nutella.
Nutella neighbor. Yeah.
Did you speak with a French accent?
No,
At
I had
that
to,
point?
when I was very, very young, but I had to learn English properly to go to school, and so in order to not be different, I kind of eliminated any kind of hint of French there might be.
Right.
And that may have been where I started
That was
sort of
the
getting a bit of an
beginning
ear.
of greatness,
Well, not my greatness, but yeah, mediocrity certainly. And I was in this sort of posh school, and there were these little revolutionary English teachers who just started going, I think you might have something that might be useful in that arena. And I didn't even know that you could be an actor. I mean, I watched actors on TV, but I didn't think that was a job you could do.
Right.
And there were a couple of teachers in particular, and it sort of culminated when I did a play called The Zoo Story by Edward Albee, an American piece, foretelling the future maybe, and just felt like I'd slotted into a niche that was mine. It was just, I felt truly at home. And I was bullied at school, and it was kind of tough. I was a sort of mediocre sportsman and a bit of a musician. I was a singer. I was a trained opera singer or I'd had
You
the
can't
beginning
be bullied
of
if you're a singer. Any kind of a singer. Singers don't get bullied.
yeah, that kind
Those
of
are
singer.
the cool dudes.
The choir boys get bullied. I was head chorister. I mean, it was kind of weird. So I was kind of part of the establishment and not at the same time, and always felt slightly displaced. But I was growing up in a country that really didn't feel like it was where I came from.
Right.
Even though it was very clearly kind of. I mean, I always say I'm sort of culturally English, but my blood is very French, very much French.
Right.
I didn't really see my father much when I was young, and I re-met him when I was much later, when I was 24, and got back in touch with that French side. But there was an English teacher there called Stuart Manger, and he said, there's this thing called the National Youth Theatre. You can go and try out, and it's in London, which was, another world for us.
Yeah.
And I tried out, and I got in. And you did this sort of summer course of 4 or 5 weeks, and you put on a production. And I was hooked. And the actor had trained at RADA, and I was like, what do you do at drama school? He said, you do this. And I was like, that's something I have to do. I have to do it, yeah. And so I went back up to Yorkshire, and I'd sort of let all my my university applications, the stuff that my parents thought I should do, I'd sort of let that go to the wayside. And I carried on doing plays a bit. I think I nearly got kicked out of school, because that was just what I wanted to do, and I was much more focused on the plays than the work. All my report cards at school were like, he's very intelligent, very smart, but bone idle. He doesn't care about any of this. And they were right. I didn't care about the schoolwork. And I was doing like headmasters' concerts and singing in choirs, and I was doing a little bit of performing, but it kind of terrified me. Because again, it was being singled out, and I didn't really want to be. It was weird. I was shy, but I was an actor, and I didn't know. The only way what I later discovered was to put that into a character. That's the disguise. That's not me anymore. Mm-hmm. If it's me, I get frightened. Right. But if it's a character, it's much easier for me to jump in. And then, sort of towards the end of my school, I sort of harped on at my mum so hard that I wanted to go to drama school, and she was like, oh, okay. So we rang around some drama schools, and it was all the end of the auditions. There was no way I was getting in. I'm like 17 at the time. And it was the end of audition season, so there was no chance. And then RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, called us back and said, there's been a cancellation on the last day of auditions. Do you want to come down? Yes, I said. It's in 3 days. So I did a piece from the Zoo Story that I'd done at school, and I did a piece from Henry IV Part 2, because I'd done that at school for A-level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I did an aria from Mozart. And I think I frightened them to death. And somehow I got in.
And you got in.
Yeah. By some miracle.
Miracle or destiny?
Who knows?
For some,
and it's a rigorous. I mean, like RADA's not messing about. It was the only one I was auditioning for, but they have like 3,000 or 4,000 people audition for 25 places every year, mm-hmm. and there were only 75 kids in the drama school. It was in George Bernard Shaw's old house that he'd given to RADA all those years ago, which is very strange. And fantastic. The walls smell of it. It's an incredibly historic place. Yeah. And you go back and you do various workshops, and then they told me I'd got in, and it was a sort of, oh my God, what now? But anyway, I moved down to London in a van from my stepfather's work with a driver who was terrified to drive in London, so I drove myself into London. We found the apartment, and I lived in a awful sort of 1-bedroom tiny top flat in London in Hackney. And London was very different then. It was tough. It was it was pretty hardcore. It was like New York used to be, not quite, but close. Yeah. And RADA was the most extraordinary place. It was you literally ate, slept, and breathed acting 24/7. It was a very strict place. You clocked on in the morning at 8 a.m.
Like a Juilliard, right?
Very much so. Yeah. And you clocked on, and if you were late once, you were in front of the principal. Twice, you could get kicked off the course. Right. But I was, a kid. I was 18. I was the youngest guy to get in that year, and there was a whole new world of freedom to me. So it's not that I kind of screwed up, RADA, but I don't think I placed as close attention as I could have.
Did you get kicked out?
I did not get kicked out.
No, he graduated.
Okay. No, I did graduate. I was fine. Yeah, they
you appreciated it more after, probably.
Yeah.
But it's not what you find is it's not what you learn at the time. It's what sinks in over the time.
Absolutely.
And 5 years later, I'd be standing on a stage and go, oh, that's what they were talking about. I get it. Yeah. But then when I came out of RADA, there wasn't any work. Theatres were closing all around the country. I didn't have an agent. I was my mother had got sick, and I went up and looked after her, so I kind of missed out on the agent run that everyone else was doing. And then I met some students from Lambda and a couple from RADA. Lambda's another drama school in London, who were setting up a theatre company for actors who'd specifically left accredited drama schools, so that they had a place to perform.
Cool.
You know, London's like New York; it has a huge fringe theatre area, and that's really where I started cutting my teeth. We found a basement in Paddington. We gutted it. We painted it black. We put up lighting rigs.
Good color,
we
black.
built a theatre.
Yeah.
Love the black. And built a theatre and started putting on productions. And we got pretty well known. We were compared to some great theatre companies. We did some tours. I did a great play about Lizzie Borden, another American piece. We took that to Hong Kong. And that was a sort of 4 or 5 year period of running that theatre.
Yeah.
One of the guys who became a director at that theatre with me, and we used to have holes in our boots, and we'd smoke single-strand roll-up cigarettes, you know, huddling over hot cups of tea. I mean, I was poor. I was eating rice just to run this theatre. He's now the artistic director of the Royal National Theatre.
Wow.
Rufus Norris, yeah.
Now he's having risotto.
Now he's having
risotto. Yes, and probably with the odd truffle grated
Yes.
jelly.
Exactly, right?
But so it's kind of it's weird how we turn out.
Yeah.
And then I kind of embarked on a bit of national theatre, rural theatre in England, in the UK. I worked in Stoke and a few towns around the UK doing repertory, what used to be called repertory theatre.
Yeah.
Tough gig, you know, not a lot of money. And then I sort of washed up at the end at the National Theatre. And I got a job with a very brilliant director called Howard Davies, who only died a couple of weeks ago. And I was suddenly part of what was kind of the National Theatre Company, and I spent 5 years there, 3.5 years, and I did about 4 or 5 shows.
Right.
Crazy place, because they have 3 theatres in the building, and often 3 shows in each theatre at any given time. So one show will run for 8 shows. They'll take the set out, put another set in, run another one for 8, take that out. And at one point, there were times where I was rehearsing one play during the day and performing 2 different plays at night. And you, as we say in England, you don't know your arse from your elbow. You're so tired, it's just like this, you're just blundering through, but by gum do you get your kind of comeuppance. You understand just what that kind of driven, hard, you know, be there, you don't miss a show, you're not allowed to call in sick, you're just there. And it was an extraordinary time because it's such an institution. I got to meet Ian McKellen and Ben Kingsley and Judi Dench and, I mean, all these incredible people and work with some of them. So it was extraordinary. It culminated in 2 productions of Greek tragedies directed by a guy called Sir Peter Hall, who started the Royal Shakespeare Company. It's all very boring theatre talk, which I thought was going to be the most amazing experience of my life. It was not. It was a nasty experience. We actually opened the production in Epidavros in Greece in a 15,000-seat amphitheatre.
Oh my, how authentic of you.
Right behind the burial grounds of Delphi. And when we went over there and rehearsed all night and performed 2 shows at the end of the week to 10,000 people, which was extraordinary. Yeah, amazing.
That's
in
really
full
cool.
mask. Full Greek tragic masks and all this stuff. I came out of that experience and I was not happy. I was pretty miserable. I'd done a lot of touring. I'd worked a lot of theatre. I was exhausted. Theatre is a tough game. I couldn't still pay my bills, even though I was at the National Theatre, which should have been kind of the top of my game. It was the West End, London, you know. But, you know, London got increasingly expensive and it was tough. And I'd had some bad experiences on that production and I was a bit disillusioned. And a friend of mine said, listen, I've got this web design company. Why don't you come and work for me? I was doing the odd bits of voiceover. The only voiceover I'd ever done was corporate stuff for what they used to call CD-ROMs.
Right. I remember those.
Yes.
CD-ROM.
And it'd be stuff like medical equipment and,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of, you know, dog work. And so I did that, and then he sort of put me into sales and started, and I ended up, I was there for 2.5 years. I ended up as accounts director for the company.
Oh my.
And had, you know, great wage and a company car. And 2.5 years, and I literally wanted to stab myself in the face. I had a great wage.
Man. You
I had
can't
a
get a
great car.
creative person and throw them in a friggin' cell like that.
I just wanted to shoot myself. And so this is how it went down. I came home from work, and I was sitting on the couch, and I was just thinking, oh my God, what have you done? You used to have like fire in your eyes and passion, and you used to love what you were doing. And now you've let your agent go, you've let everything, you've lost all your contacts, and the phone rang. I swear to God on this second. And I picked up the phone and I went, hello? Hi, JB. this is Priscilla John. Do you remember me? And I said, yeah, I remember you. She's a casting director. She said, are you still working? I hadn't worked for 2.5 years.
Sure.
Yes, I am. What? Why? She says, there's this movie, The Count of Monte Cristo. The director's coming into town. I don't know. I think there might be some stuff in there. Do you want to meet him? And I went, yes, I do. I really, really want to meet him. I bit her arm off, basically.
Yeah.
And so I met Kevin Reynolds, and he's very dry and from Texas. He's like, your stuff's really good, man. I don't know how I'm going to get you in this movie, but I want you in this movie. We're going to do this, so we'll figure it out, okay? I was like, okay, all right. And originally I was up for the part that Luis Guzman
By the way,
played.
anytime you talk about anybody else, there's a different dialect today. You're going to do it in their dialect. All right? Because that's what this guy's the king at.
I forgot to do the Lebanese.
They were going
I
to do
should have done
that.
it. What was I doing?
We made the hummus I baked for you, all right? Very
Delicious,
nice,
with little
sweetheart.
lavash,
Very
some
good.
hummus.
Marhaba. Yeah.
Yeah, so originally I was gonna do Luis Guzman's part, and Luis Guzman, he's a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
Yo, JB, come to my trailer. We're gonna listen to some Santana. Get your lunch. We'll listen to some Santana, man. It's gonna be great. Santana, you love Santana. We shot that in Ireland and Malta. They got me. Eventually I got the part of Luigi Vampa, who's this sort of ne'er-do-well pirate who comes back and dots out throughout the movie. And suddenly I'd landed this, great role in this movie.
Great role.
I was paid appallingly badly for it because the British equity is not a great strong union. So most British actors on American movies are on kind of crappy equity buyouts. I think I made £6,000 for that entire film.
Which is only $3 grand.
No residuals. Never had a residual.
Oh, I'm having a pain.
Yeah. And that thing never stops playing. It's on all the time. But the good thing is I'm not bitter.
Right.
No.
Well, no. I mean, they got you out of jail.
You spent £6,000 in therapy, and you got through it.
Yeah,
so you're like, it's a wash.
Completely, man.
So when Count of Monte Cristo was coming out, I was like, Hollywood adaptation of a great European novel, it's not going to do well in Europe.
Yeah.
Maybe I should. And Kevin had said, am I going to have to do him again? You should come and have a look at LA. No, he said, you should come and have a look at LA. I think you'd do okay. Come and stay. Why don't you stay with my assistant, come over for 10 days, have a look, see what you think. I came over. This was about 2000. And so I knew one person, and I had a look around, and I thought, sunshine, palm trees, potential career. It was amazing because I could call people up and say I was in the Count of Monte Cristo, and they were like, oh yeah, no, let's have lunch. And in England, I'd always felt in England as an actor that I was part of some sort of game, and it was a lottery. I threw dice, and maybe I scored. And then I felt if I did the job, I was sort of doing someone else a favor.
Right.
It wasn't a business, and people frowned on actors in England, even though it's got this great tradition. It was sort of, my parents' friends would sort of say, yeah, sort of acting, not very much money in that, is that? It's more of a jolly, really, isn't it?
Right.
And when I got to America, it was a business. It was a real business, and you were something to be marketed, and that took me a while to get my head wrapped around.
Yeah.
So I came over for the 10 days, had a look, and thought, sod it. I went home, I sold everything I had, and I moved. And I arrived here. I stopped off in New York to see friends. This was August of 2001. I did a bit of tourism, because I'd done tourism in New York, and I went up one of the towers. And then I flew here, and 10 days later, 9/11 happened.
Wow.
And it sort of changed everything in terms of, I was arriving here like, I'm going to be a star. And the movie got pushed and the country went into a different place. And it was a very interesting time to arrive in the US.
It definitely was.
Yeah, so that's how I got here. Yeah.
Wow. But the important thing is that you arrived.
I did, I suppose.
You did.
Yeah.
And your
And
life
now
changed.
you're a citizen, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Of course, when I arrived, casting directors would say, because I had nothing on tape. I had no on-camera stuff, and I wasn't doing voiceover yet. So I had a clip from the Count of Monte Cristo, and so what have you been doing? Theatre.
Oh.
So theatre, how does that work? That's what the sort of questions I would get.
Wow.
Now people go, "Oh, you've done theatre, great."
Yeah, theatre. Yeah.
But it was a bit misunderstood.
Yeah.
It was a bit like they didn't really know what to do with me.
Yeah.
But I found an agent who was theatre aware, and I joined them.
Here.
Here. And And I wasn't working. It was very tough. And then I met a guy, well, my friend Victoria, who was the person who I was at drama school with, was doing this anime series called Hellsing. Mm-hmm. And she said, "They're looking for English voices. Why don't you come along and have a go?" And I went, "All right." So I did. And I met Crispin Freeman, and I met Taz and Jaffe, and I got the part of this. He was called the Cheddar Priest, I think.
You met Crispin Freeman when he was like, what, 17?
Yeah.
Isn't he still?
He
just looks permanently 17.
No, yeah, he's permanently 17. Exactly.
He was playing Alucard,
Yeah.
Which was Dracula backwards, except the Japanese wanted to call him Arucard because they said Dracula.
Yeah.
And so we had to convince them that it was Alucard,
Yeah.
not Arucard.
Yeah.
And I played this sort of Cheddar Gorge priest who was this sort of very kind of nasty individual who said things like, "I know you're feeling pain, but I will give you pleasure, and it will last forever."
Nice.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I played this sort of demonic Vatican envoy called Maxwell, and that was my first sort of foray into voiceover, really, of anything that hadn't been corporate.
Right.
That's cool. So,
Well, and plus you're doing dubbing.
Which is the hardest.
So
one of
you
the hardest
go
things to
from
do.
theater and film to not just voiceover, but dubbing
Yeah.
anime, which is its own beautiful craft.
Certainly
and business
is.
Totally, man.
Yeah,
So
certainly
what
is.
was that? I mean, and even now, I mean, you transition so beautifully between on camera and voiceover. But did you have any misconceptions, or what was that transition like for you?
I think the beauty of it was that I didn't have any preconceptions whatsoever. I was being sent in to do a job. I will say that theatre teaches you to be very adaptable.
yeah.
And particularly as I run my own company, you're constantly leaping in and out of everything. You know,
Right.
you're doing
Right.
every job, everything that you can. And I was here, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to work in America in whatever capacity I could.
Yeah.
And so I went in with my eyes very firmly open and a perspective of learning. And I still do to this day. I still kind of assume that I know nothing.
Yeah.
To leave myself open to whatever, you know, is going to come my way.
Of course.
But it was technically quite tricky.
Yeah.
You know, the beeps, the format, the matching flap, trying to get these characters. I went away and studied anime a little bit to try and figure out what it was as a performance art. And it seemed to turn out great. And then I started doing little bits of more anime. And then they asked me to direct a very bizarre series called Licensed by Royal. I think because it was set in England, they thought I'd be good at directing it. So I directed that anime. And in the meantime, I was sort of trying to get my papers together and I got an O1 visa, which is an artist visa to be here. Because when you're coming from abroad, you don't exist. You don't have credit history. You don't have social security number.
Yeah.
You don't have a driver's license. You got to do all that stuff and try and exist legitimately in the United States. I'm basically a dreamer.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, I started going out on TV things, and the first job I got was in the last season of NYPD Blue. And I was so happy because I used to watch that as a sort of drunken student after I came home from the pub. You know, and it was this hour-long character development, which was fairly new in TV at the time. So I got to meet Sipowicz, and I got to do the thing, and I played a guy from Brooklyn, and I figured, like, if I fooled them, I was going to be okay. I couldn't believe I'd got the job.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I'm actually amazed. Like, when you play these different characters, it's just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How could he do that? Because you really become like the real thing, man.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
Well, and physicality too.
Absolutely.
Not just taking out the accent.
Did this happen just by, you just getting jobs and adapting and doing it, or were you strategically teaching yourself how to do these different things so that could be like a tool?
No, I mean, I'm not the first voice actor to walk in here and tell you that they learned to do voices by doing impressions of people to get out of trouble.
Right.
So I would do impressions of teachers. I would take people off, and I was a musician, so I had an ear.
Right. He said ear, by the way, for those of you who didn't
I had
understand
an ear.
the accent.
I
Ear.
had an
He has
ear.
an
He had
ear.
an ear.
I had an ear.
Ear.
You make me feel so posh now. This was a huge
You're
mistake. I should never have
He's
come.
so
Get me out of here.
fancy.
Help
You
me.
should have never
You
come.
talk so fancy.
All right,
Chuck, don't heckle.
we're not heckling.
That's what the
But
studio audience is for.
Oh, yeah, they're loud enough. Jesus. So I had an ear for dialect. I mean, and actually, the dialects, this is going to be very annoying, but the dialects was not something I found too difficult. it was getting in the mindset of other characters. And I always had the theatre company was a physical theatre company.
Yeah.
So there are companies like Theatre de Complicité that are very physical, and it would be a chair, be a pig, be a lamppost, do stuff, just changing up. There would be very few props, and everyone would provide what was going on stage.
Right.
So that was very open to sort of improvisational skills, to adapting very quickly, taking on things very quickly, and accents are characters in their own right too. So if I'm teaching, sometimes I'll say, you need to shrug a bit more in a French accent, because the French, they are like that. Screw you, I won the World Cup. It's no problem, Russians are deeply pained about the mother country. So if you put that into the accent, why you are doing this? What you do? But please don't do this.
Right.
Even if you're a villain, there's something sort of entreating about a Russian accent. They really want you to. So it was that kind of that physical training helped with that kind of approach to character, really.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really matter what medium you're working in. You're just telling stories. No matter what you're what you're doing, you might adapt slightly to the different styles of media. And anime is its own little bit, and TV animation is its own little bit, and video games are something else, and TV and film are different. Yeah. So you're constantly having to adapt and change.
So, and people, like, whenever there's a video game director, producer, whatever, anybody needs to be coached through some dialects and stuff like that, you're like one of the go-to guys that they send people to, don't they?
I was there for a hot minute. I mean, I was doing it for a bit. I did it for about, I was very lucky. I started thinking, I know all this stuff about dialects, I should coach. And one of the first gigs I got was coaching for a production of The History Boys at the Arminson Theatre, which was all-American cast. We had to make them British and sound like they were from Sheffield, which is basically the dialect they have in the Full Monty, if you've seen that.
Yes.
I describe the dialect as a wet cloth hitting a street. It lands, everything's flat and lands. Yeah. And as a consequence of me doing that, the LA Times did a double-page spread of me all about me doing the dialects for the show. And I had an instant dialect coaching business.
Of course.
And so I started it in that. But it's always hard, because I had a voiceover career that I wanted to pursue. I had an on-camera career that I was still trying to pursue. I still am.
Yep.
And so it was always a juggle, and it was a question of, and I don't like letting people down. So if someone's taking me on, I want to be consistent. I want to be there. I want to be able to support them, because it shouldn't just be a one-off. And then I got a lot of sort of fans who wanted to be in the business but weren't really ready for dialect coaching before they'd started acting training, really.
Right.
And so that didn't feel too good. And then I just got really stupid busy. And I couldn't really afford to teach anymore. I didn't have the time. So I sort of let it go. Now it's great, because my mates come to me.
Right.
So they come, all my friends in VO, if they need a dialect, then they'll call me up.
So you're really just working with some of the top
friends.
layer.
I don't even charge them.
You don't charge?
No, I just I
See, that's why I like English people, man.
Well, no, and many of them have mentioned you on the show. Your name has been swirling here for a while. Do you have any, for people that are watching, I think it's an interesting point that the acting layer has to be intact before you try to put a different character or dialect on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, from the approach of someone coming into the business, then get the acting right first every time. Yeah. I mean, and getting it right is a silly phrase to say. It's something you work on getting right until you fall over.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. But there's no point in just learning a dialect if you don't understand anything about character, or trying to really get inside a character and ask the right questions and be the investigator that you need to be as an actor. Right. And so it's arse about tit, if you like, in terms of that's an English phrase, meaning it's the wrong way round, children.
There's the translation.
It's the wrong way to
what he meant to say. No.
I'm gonna get a DiMaggio rating on this show.
In the Americas, we say upside down.
Upside down. Back to
so, but for anybody out there watching who's really trying to master, let's say they've got the acting shops going, are there any kind of just maybe a couple little tips about really getting into a dialect? How do you dissect it?
It's so hard because each individual actor is different, and my approach to coaching for dialects was, and my approach to directing now, is what strength does that actor have to start with? Let's start with what you've got.
Yeah.
And it can be about facial shape, it can be about physicality, it can be about environment, it can be about weather. You know, things are changed. People change the pace of the way they speak. You know, if you're a Southerner, you speak much slower with this kind of heavy. You get that kind of Williams-esque drawl. New Yorkers are faster, and it's a pace thing.
Right.
The only way the sort of the great word of wisdom. A lot of people ask for British accents.
Right.
And there's a fundamental difference in the way that a British and an American accent works. If I'm speaking with an American accent, everything kind of flattens out, and I'm speaking with an egg lying on its side at the back of my mouth. So what I say to people is that you kind of smile inside the mouth when you're doing an American accent. If you take that egg and you turn it on its end, you're working in a much more up and down manner at the back of the mouth. And you see, people think British people speak very quickly. We don't. We travel between the sounds further. So because there's so much travel going on, it sounds like you're speaking quickly because you're going forwards and backwards and up and down.
Right.
With American, you're kind of flattening out into the same kind of place. And I think it's why a lot of Brits are good at American accents, is because we're relaxing down into it. Americans having to reach up and use muscles that they don't normally use.
Right.
And they exactly.
Right.
Yes, of course.
Look at your egg flipping up there.
Sure, I will.
I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was would turn
But
into
even
character
the
assassination.
subtle nuances, and I think it was Mary Elizabeth McGlynn who said that, you every region of England has a slight nuance that you,
Of course, yeah. I do a little tour sometimes. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Well, so I grew up in North Yorkshire. I mean, literally, if you go into detail, 20 miles down the road, they speak with a different dialect.
Okay.
It's nuts. It's a tiny place.
Yeah.
You could fit 3 of them inside California. So if I start in North Yorkshire, which is sort of northeast England, that's a very kind of practical farmer's way of talking. And if you go a bit further northeast, you get into like Newcastle, where they have this kind of strange influence that comes from, and you won't be able to understand a word I'm saying, I'm sure, but it comes from the like Nordic influences, so it sounds a little bit like the Swedish chef,
Right.
So it has that kind of bounce in it, and people are saying like, what's up, man? What are you talking? I didn't talk like that, man. Which is very strange.
Right.
Then you get into sort of eastern Scotland, which is kind of Edinburgh, and very kind of genteel and kind of nice. And you go up into the Highlands where it gets really kind of raw, down to Glasgow, which is much harder. What are you looking at? Your mother's so.
Right.
Your mother's so. Well, stitch dash. I play a character on a series called Dragon's Race to the Edge, which is based on How to Train Your Dragons. And his name's Riker. And you can't have those dragons. I've got your dragons and they're mine now.
Yeah.
Just very sinister and dangerous.
Yeah.
Then you get down into sort of Lancashire, which has this sort of, it's where a lot of the bird R of American came from.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where people like, Blackburn and Clitheroe and cities like that. You've got Liverpool over there in the sort of northwest coast, where everyone talks like the Beatles, they do down below, don't they, though? Comrades, what's you doing? Shut up. That sort of stuff. Manchester, which is where everyone talks a bit like Oasis, if you've got a thick Manchester accent, it goes much more into the nose like that.
Right.
I mean, that could go on. You go into Wales, which has this lovely, rounded, beautiful way in the southern Wales.
And then you go to Mexico.
And you talk like this, man. Where are you going to go?
Okay.
So I mean, it goes on and on.
That is so cool.
Yeah, but that's wonderful. And I think, we hear these regions all the time, so we're hearing different dialects all the time.
Have you ever made like a recording of you traveling through the world?
I haven't, no.
You should do that.
That would be outstanding.
I would be happy to
Someone's
do
already
that
done
with
it
you.
on the tube
We would-
of you.
Buddy,
Yeah.
that would be, you become a YouTube sensation.
We'll produce that with you.
So,
that would be awesome.
Wherever we can.
Yeah.
Let's get to the important part of your story, which is when you landed in Los Angeles and you found your way somehow to Chuck Duran.
Yeah, how did that happen?
do a
Because-
demo.
I just followed my nose. It was the smell, I think. So
smell of Aquanet.
I've been sort of poodling around, for want of a better term, in anime, and I was talking to people like Crispin and like Tannerson, and I was this is
I had
something I
worked
could
with Crispin,
do.
so it might have been him
Might have
who
been
said-
him. Yeah, he said Chuck Duran. I think it was.
Okay.
Thanks, Crispin.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Kristen.
yeah.
You're a great guy.
By the way, Crispin, you're next.
Yeah.
You're gonna be sitting in that chair pretty soon.
Pick out your outfit.
Keeping it warm for you, love.
Absolutely. So you came in and we did a commercial demo.
Yeah, we did a commercial
Why a
demo.
commercial demo? Because I mean,
Well, because I came in to talk to you, and I didn't have an agent.
Okay.
And I've been doing some stuff, and you listened to me, and we talked, and you said, I think in order to get an agent to get representation,
Sure.
you need a commercial demo first. I think people are more aware of games and animation than they
Yeah.
were then, because this was
yeah.
early days.
Yeah.
And so you were very clear that it was a commercial demo that I really needed to
Right.
do. And I came in and you gave me all this copy, and it was collaborative. We talked,
Yeah.
and you figured out what would be good.
Yeah.
And I was kind of
By the way, that was like in 2002.
two. Yeah.
And because I just heard your demo not too long ago, I have
Went
to
to
go,
the
oh my
archives.
I have to go
God.
back up my database and check it out. And I
BMW
gotta
7
say, man,
Series.
I listened to it and I'm like, oh my God. Like you were fantastic
Oh,
even
God.
back then.
I'd never done
the
any. That
sound
was
of
the
your
first thing I
voice
ever
was
did.
just like so beautiful. Even to this day, I have one of your spots. I think it was maybe a BMW spot or something like that. It's on my website right
Be
now,
the
Devils
measure
at
of all
Rock, as
things.
one of the samples because I love your voice so much.
Guess who never books commercially?
Wait,
You.
let me think.
Hardly ever. I mean, rarely.
So what
And
happened after that? Did you get an agent? Did you?
Because I got an agent. Yeah, I sent that out, and I sent it out to a lot of agents who would love to represent me now, and they didn't even look at it.
oh,
Well, because that's what happens.
Yeah, of
You've got
course,
to
you
keep
know?
going. You've got to
Yeah,
keep going.
yeah.
And I got response from a small, medium-sized agency. I'm not going to mention them. And small, medium-sized, the smaller side of medium-sized.
William Morris. No, I'm just kidding.
and that was great. It was great
Yeah.
to have representation. And I started gigging. I think one of the first games I did was From Russia with Love, James Bond From Russia with Love, and I had a great part in it.
Yeah.
It was facial capture. It was all very new. I mean, I was thrown right into the fire
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of the character work that I'd done throughout my career to
course,
that
man.
point
Yeah, you were.
that really the link then to doing voice, whilst it was alienating to be in front of a microphone suddenly and to be locked in a room with thick glass with people talking about you on the other side, I felt okay. I felt like it was something I could link to and could connect with. It was ironic that it was the commercial demo that got me an agent, and then started working in games principally.
Of course.
Right.
Chris Zimmerman gave me one of my first gigs. Yutaka Maseba gave me some of my first gigs in anime and games up there at Magnitude 8
Yeah.
back in the day. Kevin Seymour, the lovely Kevin Seymour, who gave me some opportunities there as well. But ultimately, I ran into, for instance, one, you may not have heard of him, a guy called, is it Baker, Troy Baker?
Troy Baker. Is he from Texas?
I think he's from
Something like that.
Texas too. But I did a session with him, and he looked at me and went, "Oh, who are you? Where? Are you? Do you know so and so? Do you know so and so? Do you know
Yeah,
so and so?"
yeah.
And I didn't, and he introduced me to about 4 directors that I will be forever grateful to him for.
Yeah.
And I just started putting myself around a bit. Years later, when I suddenly realized that I was hearing about projects. I was getting into a better caliber of work. I was hearing about projects often after they'd happened,
Yeah.
and it came time. I'm deeply loyal, probably to a bad extent. It came time when I realized that I needed bigger, better representation.
Yeah.
So another one of these happy accidents in my life happened. I was working out at a gym with a trainer in New York, in
And this Russian dude came up
in
to him and
Studio
said,
City. In Studio City, not a spit from right here. And there was this woman who used to work out next to me, and she'd walk, and this older guy would come and walk next to her. And we'd shoot the shit about the stupid television and the stupid politics and the stupid sports or whatever was going on. And we just chatted. And my trainer, who was a guy from New York, came up to me and said, JB, you know who that is? I said, no. He said, you do voiceover and shit, right? I was like, yeah, I do voiceover. He goes, it's Arlene Thornton.
Oh,
I said, what? And I knew who she was.
Yeah.
We never got on name terms, but we just sort of... So he said, you want me to have a word? And I said, yeah, sure, okay. Well, yeah, all right, yeah, fine. So she said, so the next time we were walking on the treadmill, she goes, so, I hear you do voices. You do voice work. I said, yeah, I do voice work. She said, are you happy? I said, no, I'm not happy. She said, oh, we should talk. Do you have stuff? I said, I have stuff. So I sent her Chuck Duran's.
oh, good.
I said, I sent this to you
Yeah,
about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
She said, oh, sometimes I get, I said, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So I went in there. She said, "Okay, well, I've called around town, and the word is good. When are you going to fire your agent?" I said, "Well, I don't know.
Can I do that?"
She
And
said,
he's like, "Yes, you can."
She said, "Drive over there now. Come, do the deal. Come back here, and I'll have 20 pieces of copy for you to read." And I did. And the copy was going in with the booth directors and them putting you through the works.
Yeah.
The sort of agency baptism.
Yeah. Agency baptism.
It is a bit, yeah, fire or otherwise. Sometimes it's nice holy water, but occasionally it's fire.
Yeah.
And I did that, and she said, "Well, we haven't figured out what you can't do, so I'm going to give you everything." And
Beautiful.
And
That's how we
I
like
don't want you to meet anyone else. Sign on the dotted line. Let's do this. And I booked immediately, and I was, it was just like recognize that I needed some power behind me.
Totally, man.
But I wouldn't have wanted that to have happened before I was ready. You know, because that's a different caliber of
Absolutely.
work
Everything
to,
happens at the right time.
to
Yeah.
move up to.
Yeah.
So, and Arlene and I have been, partners ever since. I adore her, and the older gentleman next to her was obviously Jack Angel, who was
Nice,
working.
yeah, exactly.
So
that's
I love Jack.
amazing.
So I love
Wow.
them both.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So, and you're still with Arlene,
Still
of
with
course,
Arlene.
and
Yeah.
she's fabulous.
Love her.
Hi,
Yes.
Arlene.
Hi, Arlene.
Hi, Arlene.
Big ol'.
So very, very cool. So, dude, we got to go there. All right, one of my favorite shows ever created. You were on it. And I want to know what it felt like to be on such a huge freaking mega franchise that took over the world, Breaking Bad. Hello.
Yeah.
And I saw you on that. So what was it like to just, be on a show that huge? You
Kinda
must have been a little freaked out.
Great. Well, so yeah, I did two.
He said kind of great.
I did 2 episodes. When I auditioned for the show, there was people mentioning it, but it wasn't really a big deal.
You mean you didn't know?
No,
how
I
big
didn't
it
really
was?
know much about it.
Because this was already deeper into.
So while I was auditioning while season 3 was just being played.
Okay.
So that was just airing.
Yeah.
So there was buzz about it, but it wasn't like it hadn't become what it became by any means.
Yeah.
So it was cast by Sharon Bialy and Sherry Thomas, who are very prolific. They do The Walking Dead now. They do.
Yep,
They're amazing.
yep.
They've done
I'm like,
amazing shows.
Mega.
They're very big, and they cast me in a couple of little things, and they brought me in, and I saw the words Breaking Bad, and I went, "Oh, is that thing that everyone's been talking about?" And of course, I'm walking in to play a Mexican doctor.
Of course. It's like the writing's on the wall,
Because
Jamie.
of course, yeah. Like my last 5 roles on camera are Mexican, Arab, Israeli, Albanian, and Persian. Go figure. So I was suddenly I auditioned, and it was just on tape. I didn't get to meet Vince Gilligan or anything. I did the scene. She was like, "That's great," and I had it. And yeah, I was shooting, with Aaron Paul and Jonathan Banks and Giancarlo Esposito. Doing this scene, and it was nerve-wracking, and it was. I sort of once I got the job, I sort of looked into it a bit, and I was like, oh my god! And then I watched the show, and I was like, nothing had ever, in a different way to The Sopranos, but nothing had hooked me quite like this. That show is as addictive as the meth that it's about.
Completely.
But it still wasn't that big a deal, and so I sort of did it, and then it came out, and then the messages started coming, flooding in. Oh my god, dude!
Yeah.
And that was that.
Yeah.
And then by the time I did the second episode, which was in season 5, it had become a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So cool, man.
then I knew.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
really,
you. Yeah.
really, really cool.
And you know what? The nicest, most amazing crew, the most amazing people. Aaron Paul's an absolute gem. When I did the second episode, he saw me across the lot and ran over and was like, "Dude, oh my God, Mr. White, you're back." And it was just amazing, amazing
good.
experience.
Yeah.
So good.
I'll tell you, I've got a funny story about the second episode though.
Okay, go ahead. Tell me a funny story.
All right. So by the time I did the second episode, the show had blown up and it was great. And I came back to tell Mike, who's played by Jonathan Banks, amazing, phenomenal actor, that Gus had been killed. We arrive on set. It's supposed to be the Mexican desert. It's May in Albuquerque. I get there at 5 a.m. 5:15 it starts snowing. Oh, no. And really snowing. It's dumping.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be in the Mexican desert.
Oh.
So that didn't happen, and we got put on hold for a few days. And Jonathan Banks, who's a phenomenal actor, was like, "Oh, well, we got some time now. Want to get something to eat? Let's go get something to eat." So we went again. We ate, we talked. I love him. He's amazing, and we've remained friends. And then he was like, I go see a movie. We should go see. We're going to see a movie. Let's go see. He's the nicest man ever. The guy was in Beverly Hills Cop. He's a legend. He's been in everything.
He's so great, man. What a great.
And so we went to see Warhorse. And we're watching. I'm sitting there watching Warhorse, which is a kind of passionate, romantic, glorious film with Jonathan Banks. I'm thinking, what the hell is? I'm pinching myself.
So cool.
And halfway through the film, he leans over and he goes, "I'm being emotionally manipulated, and I'm loving every second of it." He's a card.
And that he basically plays himself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, to the extent that any actor does. But principally. But wonderful
cool.
man. Yeah, it was great.
That concludes part 1. We're going to be back next week with part 2 with JB. Don't miss it.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, keep up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe right down there at the logo to our YouTube channel. We love you guys. Thanks for watching. And just remember,
You always have time for a little buzz.
Come on and get buzzed with us.
VO Buzz Weekly is sponsored by Chuck Duran's Demos That Rock. The voiceover demo producer to the stars is now available to you. Visit demosthatrock.com and take your voiceover career to the next level.
See you next time, and remember, you always have time for a little buzz.